Okay, so if I can be the one to give the feedback for group one, I would say that some of the points that we looked at were the experience in the workplace really does depend. You know, whether you're going to be a person who sort of raises your head from the parapet and is prepared to say about what you see. You can sort of keep your head down and sort of try and ignore those things if you want to, but if you are the kind of person who's likely to say something about that, it's not long before you get labeled. You might be labeled as a troublemaker, you might be bullied as a result of bringing things up. And I thought this was really key, this thing of people start to keep away from you, you know, you sort of become a target. I mean, and you only need to see, I talked about playground behaviors, but you only need to see what happens in the playground for those people who are teachers. If you tell off the bad boy in a very public way, the rest of the children don't want to play with them at break time. They'll sort of keep their distance. So it's that kind of behavior that comes out of people. We heard about the lack of competence with people of power, and thank goodness Alison was there who could put all this into acronyms marvelously. She talked about the 5 C's, and you know, she had a particular story to share around that, which I won't do on her behalf. It's to her to say if she wants to, but that very quickly you can be seen as a troublemaker for speaking out loud, and the behaviors that you can see might, you know, what it brings out in yourself is that you can become depressed, upset, as people ignore you and exclude you from things. And there's victimization if you do speak up. Now, all of this concurs 100% with what we get as trade union reps and supporters and negotiators, everything that was said. So then we could talk about this idea of challenging it. And again, this label that comes with you. And I loved Malika's phrase, which talked about that she had to, in the end, become a radical lone ranger. And of the battlefield that, you know, becomes your fight for equality as you look at the constant challenge almost in every quarter and step of your life. Alison again came back to us with her P's. She talked about the policies, challenging them via the policies, the processes and the practices. And again, she's 100% right here. In the workplace, we get our successes. We tend to get our successes as trade unionists because of the foolish mistakes that people will make about how they implement their own policies. We also heard, you know, Diane was good at telling us again, illustrating it with an excellent example of how the sort of very clever way that racism can weave through a situation so that it seems like you're picking on something about somebody's work practice perhaps, or if it's a student, it might be about the way their behavior is or the way they are producing work, but actually what's underneath it all is there's been a challenge somehow within the relationship that's had a racist connotation to it. So it's that very clever way that we need to be aware of. It's not overt, it's these covert behaviors. And something very, you know, again, extremely powerful, this idea that, you know, they do try and weaken the unions, they try and weaken all of those things that can support you by asking students to spy even. I mean, that was just horrendous hearing that. You know, and this thing which happens all the time, this one is a regular one for us, not engaged after probation. We see probationary periods extended beyond belief. I can quote you a case, it's one of my own cases, because it directly happened to me, where you were on a 3-month probation and after 14 months doing the work by yourself, managing a project, we're told we don't think that you we can take you on fully for the job. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous. And that you would then have to explain to your representatives that this could possibly be an element of racism to it is just, it's just so hard. So I love these examples, and I think, did I cover everything, people? Did I cover all your points? Yes? Thank you. Right, move on. Thank you. Move on.
I'm speaking back from group 2. I think it's fair to say that I stepped in and offered a good example of the sort of behavior that troubles my friends and my colleagues. And we spent the time very usefully, and because of the courage of one person who spoke out, not giving concrete examples out of work-related places, but out of what happened between us. I thank my group for what they did. May we move on to group 3?
Hello, I'm reporting back for group 3. So the first question about what would be, we were an all-white group, so we were looking at situations that we have witnessed, and we were talking about the kind of assumptions that are often made when somebody and kind of leaping to conclusions about what somebody is saying, and how if somebody is trying to get a point across and it's not being heard properly, if they're the only black person or in a minority in a group, how easy that is then to get shot down, and the consequence being a kind of knocking of confidence, self-esteem, and that feeling of being excluded. How would you address, how would it manifest in the workplace? So we were looking about how the business of being overlooked. So we looked at the kind of social situation where somebody is simply being excluded from a social, you know, come and join us, and the offer being made constantly, but the person not wanting to take them up on it for a variety of reasons. And it may be that the person isn't, well, the obvious one would be you come down to the pub with us and you're speaking to someone who's Muslim, or someone who's just not comfortable with that kind of setting, but making leaping to conclusions or assumptions rather than actually speaking directly to the person. They may not feel that it's a safe company to be socializing with, but that business of being overlooked also obviously in kind of a job or job promotion, or as was mentioned before about being taken on after a probationary period. The third question, how do you address it or challenging? The first thing we thought was very necessary was about listening openly, again, not leaping to conclusions or thinking that you know exactly what is being, you understand exactly what's being spoken about. And then obviously following the kind of protocol or policies of the workplace. But we thought also on a more personal level, kind of offering or finding how the person discriminated against can gain some kind of support through the proceedings. Is that okay from group 3?
Yes, thank you. Margaret, you do this or am I? Okay, let's not move. I can't get Margaret unmuted. I'm not sure why.
There we
Let's
go.
move
There we
on.
go.
So, okay, there you are.
Is group 4 ready to feedback?
Hello, I'm the feedback person for group 4. Okay, first question. It's mostly broad brush strokes, I'm afraid, but black people not welcome, tolerated. It's that sort of difference, really. Yeah, we'll tolerate them. Yeah, and we're being very generous at tolerating them. That's all. When a black person enters the situation, there are no or very few other black faces to identify with, and it's fairly usual to have inadequate responses to their requests. It's quite easy to marginalize them. You have to be initiated into our club, and you're the first person we go to when racism is raised as an issue. I think that in broad brushstrokes, that's what we came up with. Someone made the point that it might manifest itself different in a manual labouring situation rather than a professional office situation. Anyway, how can you help, or how can you address it? Simple thing, let them know how shocked you are. Perhaps making an official complaint, bringing it forward, but that's the first. But even if it's in private, let them know that somebody's on their side. The other point that was made was educating yourself that this white history that you have in your head and this black history is my history. There's not a white history which is being intruded upon by these black faces. Those black faces is my history. I think that would be a big deal, my own opinion. Occasionally, if you're in a managerial position, is there a possibility of finding the occasional safe space for black employees? That's it. If anybody wants to say anything else?
If I could just add that the safe space is for black people to have that time to talk together, and then they could have a spokesperson to come and speak to the employers, raising the points that the group have raised that might be difficult for them to do individually.
Thank you. Can we move to group 5 now, please?
Hiya. Okay, so experience of black workers in the workplace, just to give you a little bit of context. Our group was a all-white group of people who are predominantly either retired or self-employed, so we didn't have sort of we just had different experiences to draw upon that, and we said that people would perhaps, it's likely that black people are likely to feel quite isolated, particularly if they are the only person of colour in that organisation, and around that a fear of will people listen to me non-judgmentally without minimising my experiences, when I share them, if I have concerns, are they going to be taken seriously? Are leaders genuinely committed to diversity and inclusion, because it doesn't look like it if there's only one person of colour in the organisation. And so that will kind of bring a lot of challenges with it for that individual, and some anxiety in terms of, yeah, how much support will that person get? Are they going to be listened to and really valued? Can they make progress? Can they see themselves staying there? Can they see themselves being promoted? And in terms of the types of discrimination, we discussed names actually to begin with, and that names can prevent people, well, not the person's name, somebody's racial bias can prevent somebody's name from even being looked at in terms of being shortlisted and getting to interview in the first place. And there's an example where a person's postcode had also gone against them because of the area that they lived in. So obviously, anonymised CVs, everyone. But it was, yeah, names, people changing their names due to the discrimination that they'd experienced, and therefore anglicising names so that that discrimination is less likely to occur. People, in terms of types of discrimination that can happen sort of at an organisational level, being overlooked for promotions, being wrongly accused, an assumption of criminality, an assumption of inferiority that comes from racial bias, making comments that somebody could be a diversity hire, therefore totally discrediting their reasons for getting that job and their capabilities. Experiencing indignities, microaggressions, being victimised if they were to make a complaint, being turned against them as opposed to actually looking at the matter at hand. We did quite a bit of talking around that, and then less so on the final bit, but the overall challenge was to be totally proactive. Don't wait for things to go wrong. Organisations absolutely need to be getting trainers coming in, delivering anti-racism, anti-discrimination training, because the more people understand what the legislation says and the more they understand their rights and responsibilities, the more challenges there's going to be. And that doesn't mean necessarily that the person on the receiving end of discrimination is the person that has to call that out, but with active allies, if everyone knows the process is in place and they know their rights, then they're much more likely to proactively challenge that. That's it. I think that's it. Please jump in. Anyone else if I missed it?
We did mention the other side of people being discriminated against because of their postcode or the color of their name. It was when it's assumed that because you're white or you have a certain name or a way of speaking, that you will have privilege, that you that you are superior in some way or know better. And so your voice is listened to over the other person who is in fact getting the brunt of the discrimination.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Group 6, please.
There wasn't one. We just had 5 this week.
Just had the 5. Oh, right. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Elizabeth, do you want to come back in with anything? I'm sure you do. I hope you do.
Could I ask to share something?
Go on.
Because we didn't get an opportunity to share if anybody wanted to add to the person who was the spokesperson. I just wanted to bring up that even though that one of the experiences was how, as a person of color, I often experience white people assuming leadership. And that was the kind of big thing that came up in our group, and that's what I experienced even in our sharing group. And the other part was when we do speak up or we do challenge something, especially in spiritual faith communities like these even, you know, a point was made that somebody said they would like to see some grace. And to me, that is spiritual bypassing in this context, because we're here to actually discuss the things that are contributing to racism. And if I'm having to spiritually bypass it every time, which is what happens in my workplace and in my work situation, then we're just never going to get anywhere.
Marvelous, marvelous. I think that's an excellent contribution. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for that last contribution, but also generally everybody for their feedback. And you might ask, what can be the relevance of taking a subject like this and also expecting groups that don't have a personal experience of it to discuss this, make decisions, actually make decisions around it. You know, what are you going to do about it? It forces you to come alongside this life where that's essentially what Black people who experience racism are depending upon. They are largely depending on a predominantly group of white people with little or no experience of the actual aggressions or behaviors that we're talking about to make the ultimate big decisions because we're not there. Sometimes that's the case. And it's really, really important what happened today. It's really important for those people who felt uncomfortable with thinking, well, how am I, I don't have the answers to this. But actually, that's the people who will be put on a panel to decide the fate of somebody who's saying, I'm at breaking point. This has been 5 years in the progression, this before I called it a race case. I gave every other reason in the world, and no, I don't have anybody to support me because I didn't tell anybody. Because what it did, it caused a behavior inside of me that made me become so insular that of course I'm not sharing anything with anybody. I don't even trust anybody. I don't trust the girl who's next to me. Is she taking notes when I'm on the phone to my husband? Is she saying something that's actually going to hurt me in the workplace? And that's how it works. It's a drip approach. It's a continuous form of abuse in my book, racism when it takes place at work. It's insidious, it's extremely powerful, and it is very, very dangerous. I would like to share screens but I'd like you, Warren, first to tell me the timing that I've got before I launch into something.
In theory, 8 minutes or 7 minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm just going to whiz you through this. Just a few things. I don't know if this is the right slide, but oh, it's the wrong presentation. Just hang on a minute. It's the wrong presentation. Oh dear, hang on. It's always the way, just hang on a minute. Technology, we love it, but we hate it.
Might be easier to unshare the screen first and then you can play.
Yes, can I do that, please?
Yep.
Just unshare the screen. Thanks. So sorry about this.
We can still see what you showed us first.
Oh, can you?
Yeah. I know that happens, but I don't know how to tell you what to do. Somebody else needs to tell you.
Oh, never mind. I'll use this one. This one will do. Okay, can you see this? Yes? Can you see the screen?
It's just words.
It's there now. It's just words. Okay, I'm just going to start out quickly with just dispelling a few myths. Often people say, it's just words. They have it in their heads. One of the things that I do when I begin a course like this is do a language amnesty, because I have to get to the words that people know are used in the workplace, that I realize, and they haven't realized to that point, that they have heard them used. That's why they know them. And a majority of times, people haven't done a thing about it. And I say, well, just write the words down. It is a language amnesty. Nobody's in trouble for any of this. But when you look at it and you look at those words and you have to ask yourself, what did I do when I heard them? Okay, so words, yes, they're not just words. Words are extremely powerful. So as this says, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Language is a very powerful method of structuring attitudes. Language hugely influences how we perceive ourselves, others, and the world around us. Words can have tremendous power, and the intention behind their use doesn't necessarily alter the effect they can have. Language shapes perception and contributes to the creation and perpetuation of stereotypes. So is society fair and equal? Let's have a look. This is taser use in England and Wales. Black, white, Asian. Why is that turned up in a challenging racism in the workplace? Why can anybody, I mean, I'm going to ask you that as a question. Why would you think I would have a slide like this, which seems, you know, that's not the workplace, taser use in England and Wales. Why might that be an important thing to include today? Anyone?
Talks about disproportionality.
Yeah, it's about disproportionality.
So because the police are a workplace as well?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another good reason.
Aren't they the people we're supposed to turn to?
Yes, absolutely. They are the people who ultimately we turn to. So you have to realize this is an organization where things could be going on, spot on.
There's a general air of threat.
Yes.
Within the society itself, just the air you breathe. Really.
Well, I think something about what you're saying there, Colette, is what I'll expand on. The point is, this can be happening, you know, where there are if this is black men, those black men have families, those families have mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, nieces, nephews, all the whole shebang, and they're working potentially with you, for you, alongside you, you know. So when people are experiencing the extreme of behavior in their personal lives, and I'm not saying somebody has experienced a taser, but the point is we've got an unfair society that is doing it's the drip drip approach that I told you about. So let's look at, is it fair? Just very quickly, I can only whiz through it, but you know, we've got approximately 70% of people in national minimum wage jobs, which are women. Disabled people are far less likely to be in employment. Up to 41% of LGBT employees, I think it's gone, say that they've either been physically or verbally abused by their co-workers or had their workplace vandalized. And nearly 18% of Muslims aged 60 to 24 were unemployed, nearly 14% for those aged 25 and above. By contrast, Hindus, and you know, so it goes on. The unemployments were respectively 7% and 5. And at a point, they were reporting the figure of 5 in 10 black men unemployed. So look, let's just, I took just a one slide on something legal, and I'm not going to go any further with Chelsea in the room because she knows her stuff. But I thought I'd put this out there, just talk about racial discrimination cases. And I randomly chose 2016, 2017. So there are 2,240 cases of racial discrimination, and 3% of the issued claims went all the way to the final hearing and won. 3%. An additional 36% was settled before the case was heard. So that means, you know, there's been a kind of agreement, I won't use the fancy words for it, but for us in the trade union movement, we'd come to an agreement that the organisation more or less admits its fault and says, okay, you know, let's not go any further with this. And they will give an award. And the average award is 26,900. Now, what's important about that in the context of trade union work is that people know it costs them £60,000 minimum to bring a case like this in any sort of level. So if people have got a case where you don't have people who can support you, where you don't have, you know, any witnesses, a lot of what you're saying is your opinion. Yes, you've got a diary packed full of information, but it's not formal, concrete information, then you'll find that the case will be judged as not viable. And so you'll find that somebody says we can't take this case any further, which of course crushes people, because they say, you know, well, this has actually happened to me, and are you saying it hasn't happened? Well, people aren't saying it hasn't happened. People are saying you won't win in court, so we can't do anything with it. So it is vital that we change the workplace situation, and it is important that people who don't think they're ever going to come across it have some strategy for dealing with it. It can't rest with us, unfortunately, as Black and brown people, because if it did, we'd see a lot more change. People wouldn't have got as upset when George Floyd was murdered, because we'd feel so empowered in our workplaces and wherever we are, we'd be able to do something about what's just happened. But people can't. People are going to people who are in the majority with the power structures in charge of all of that to try and make their lives better. And that is why I came to you. Let the groups just be as they were today. I was so tempted to equalise them out, and I'm so glad it didn't happen, because it illustrates to you what we need to happen. You need to know. We know what we're experiencing, and we're knocking against a closed door. We're knocking against a door of people who say, I don't know what to do with this. If I could have £1 for every manager who said, I don't know what to do with it, and then discipline somebody out of the workplace, it's horrendous. So I beg that people do grasp this. I thank you for every contribution you gave back today. It's so, so important. So I'm just going to just quickly say, you know, about discrimination. You know, we do have the same concerns as anybody else in terms of employment, pay, conditions of service, promotion and progression and training. But racist discrimination deepens this negative impact. And these are all areas where we can be ignored. And the things that we need people to be looking at are recruitment and retention, the ways that people are kept on or not. You need to look at the amounts of disciplinaries that are caused against. How quickly does somebody say it's somebody's attitude? How quickly do people decide to move to a formal procedure with someone of colour in the workplace? So I'm just looking here that that CRW is challenging racism in the workplace. That just tells you about the Equality Act, and I'm sure that that was something that was covered already by Alison. But just to show you the pyramid of hate, because racial discrimination is a hate crime. It is a crime, and people can take it outside of an organisation to deal with it. You know, it starts with prejudicial attitudes. Acts of prejudices will follow, and that is the isolation, that is the separating that person off from everybody else, because they're just too difficult to deal with. We just don't know quite how to work with this person. You know, they're always going off on their own. They don't come to the pub with us. It's all these little tiny things, and they become discrimination. It makes it mean they are the less likely person for you to choose when there's a chance for promotion, when there is that additional job. And these things ultimately can lead to physical attacks and lead to genocide, but that is the pyramid of hate. So I'm finishing now because I see my time has gone, but we've talked a lot about race within these within this group. But I would like to leave you with saying that, you know, please make time to plan. And somebody said it today, and I was so pleased to hear it. Make sure that you plan in time to educate yourself against the prejudices, sorry, finger slip. And the solutions are not only punitive. So, you know, think about these challenges, think about how it's hate crime, and when it's put into this context, you would think much stronger. If you thought that somebody could go out of there and take it to a police station, you would think differently about it. So the change we require to happen is way, way above the point when we're ending up at tribunal. It is with the people alongside us, the people who work alongside us. It is that extra word that my employers could have given me after Black Lives Matter. And it is that kindness, that support, and that understanding, that commitment to understanding. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here with you today. I'm sorry we didn't hear so many of people's stories because they were absolutely incredible. And I'd love to come back another day and do an extension on the sorts of examples I think that would have helped people in this room today really understand the form of race hate, which I do put it in a hate context. I absolutely do. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's been a very powerful evening. I think it's the word uncomfortable was used earlier. I think there are various elements that have been quite uncomfortable tonight at various stages. We still have one more workshop in this series to go. And I'll say a tiny bit about that afterwards. We are going to read together the pledge for Black Lives Matter, which I think Malika is going to lead us with. Are you able to sort of stop sharing your screen, Elizabeth?
Yes, yes, sorry.
Thanks, so I can then
sorry,
put that up.
yes, thank you.
No problem, brilliant. Malika, are you ready to lead us? I will put the pledge, no I won't, I will hold on. I will share the screen for the pledge, and it's there. Are you ready with us, Malika?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Can I invite people to put themselves on mute? And say it to yourself. I'm just going to get my own copy because I can't move that, Warren.
Okay.
Unless you move it for me.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah, okay.
Anything you want.
Ah, fantastic. One of my favourite brothers. So this is the Black Lives Matter pledge. And you can either repeat after me or say it with me, but keep your please keep your mics on mute. Racism has no place in this world, in our country, in our cities, in our community, or in our home. We will use our voice, our platform to challenge racism at every opportunity. To our colleagues, families, and friends from the Black community, we stand in solidarity with you all. We are your pathmates, and we shall use our voices to challenge racism at every opportunity. We will look within our communities and identify where we can do better and continue to challenge those who know better. Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Malika.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Elizabeth, in particular tonight, for helping us grapple with so many of the issues. We recognize there are so many, and I think that we still have so far to go to actually deal with them properly and effectively. But I sincerely hope that we do have the commitment to continue this journey together and to work towards it. We still have, as I said, one more workshop in this series, and next week Sue Cotterill, who moved us very much at our conference in November, talking about white supremacy and white privilege, and next week Sue is going to help us on becoming a white ally. It might be that we want to look at the section that Sue led in the conference, and later this week, when I'm sending out a reminder about Monday, I'll send out the link to the conference, and you just have to choose the right section, the right YouTube clip to just listen again to what Sue spoke to us about and challenged us with then. And we look forward to be challenged even more next week. Next week won't be the end of our projects. We're hoping for an evening of poetry, Black poetry in March, November, next month, in the middle of March. We'll have details hopefully next Monday, and we will hopefully, well, we would love any of you who want to be involved in planning for further, but really we want to see action after this series of workshops. So one of the things we're hoping is that we can all make a commitment towards doing something and taking something away from these and then bringing back, and we can feedback. I'm aware it's 22, we're over 10 minutes over, but thank you all. God bless you. Stay well. Have a good week. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you all our team and all of you for being with us on this journey.